Oke, selamat pagi Bapak. Saya revisi karena tadi salah membuat video. Oke, so the question I most commonly ask about the climate change is should I be optimistic or should be pessimistic? I thought about this question a lot. My career has been at intersection of climate science, technology, policy, and industry, mostly working for you. At the one point, working for a U.S. president, and now as a chief scientist and chief carbon wrangler at Carbon Direct. At that intersection, I think about that question in terms of energy flows and carbon abundant option. So I wonder a variant of that question. How much energy should 10 billion people use? I was first prompted to think about this question by the late great writer Smiley. Nanotechnologies, Nobel Prizes winning chemist, co-discovered Buckyballs, Totomensch. He gave an important and influential talk almost exactly 20 years ago, in which he laid out the top 10 challenges to human energy, water, food, poverty, the environment, and health. And then she said something kind of obvious. All these are energy challenges. Water is most straightforward. Three-quarters of the Earth's surface is covered with water. It's too salty to drink or use. The primary cause of this salination of energy, food. I like food. 80% of the food consumed around the world moves through modern agriculture. That means synthetic fertilizer, combined that harvest, refrigeration, shipping. They are all energy. Climate. That's my day job. How do we go from 54 billion tons of greenhouse gases every year to less than zero very quickly, and so on? Abundant green energy can make progress against this whole list. So Richard estimated that he thought it would take for 10 billion humans to live more or less like the United States. And his answer was 60 terawatts. Keep that number in your mind, 60. For reference, today, the world uses about 26 terawatts of energy, about 8 terawatts of total electricity. Now, the urgency of climate means that we have to, for all of the energy we use today and all future energy really has to be abundant, sustainable, and cheap. Abundant, available where you want it. Where you want it, everybody should have energy, including the 3 billion people who use less electricity than my refrigerator uses. However, it should also be sustainable. We can emit a lot of greenhouse gases. We can trash nature. Ideally, it's cheap, a lot cheaper than today. Maybe half of third of what US pays. That would be $20 of megawatt hour or $1 of gigajoule. And remember, it's energy, not electricity. We also heat for heavy industry. We need clean fuels, things like green hydrogen or sustainable aviation fuels. Well, that seems hard, and it is. But if you know that's what you need or what you want, abundant, sustainable, and cheap energy, we have a new question to ponder. How do we get 60 terawatts of that 10 billion people? Well, the good news is every day the Earth receives 100 1060 terawatts of energy from the sun. About half that bunches back to space, but about 1800 terawatts arrive at the Earth in a form we can use. For example, the air, land, and ocean convert some of that into about 870 terawatts of wind. These are bigger number than 60, and we've got more than solar and wind. We've got geothermal, we have hydro, we have nuclear. There is one kind of clean energy, And some of the best resorts are in fact in the global south. These places are not simply future climate victims. These places are latent energy superpowers, and we've made some good starts. Let's look at Chile. Based on abundant hydro, solar, and wind, they can make green electrons on demand. A lot of those green electrons are going to get turned into hydrogen and ammonia, the key of ingredient for fertilizer itself, a good fuel and a great way to move to clean energy around the world. Now, Chile has prioritized using these green electrons and hydrogen to decarbonize its own grid and for domestic energy use. For things like mining, they are also building infrastructure. They are building out of grid and parts of trade and commerce. This prioritization is emphasis on infrastructure is the difference between a neocolonial economy and a new economy built on abundance. Let's go to Kenya, home of the second most productive wind farm on Earth in Lake Turkana, home of the second largest geothermal program on Earth and future home of the Great Carbon Valley, where this abundant, sustainable, cheap energy will create whole new industries and pull carbon dioxide out of the sky. Now, those are good starts, but we have far to go. Hashtags we need more. Specifically, we need new investment vehicles. We need development mechanism that recognize the opportunity of abundance as opposite to being built on the scarcities of the past. A favorite example, Namibia, a young rapidly growing nation full of promise. One of the very driest places on earth. Namibia has excellent solar and wind resources, in particular on the southwest. Unsurprisingly, a giant $10 billion project is building along that will land 3,000 megawatts of solars on the ground and 3,000 megawatts of wind that feed 3,000 megawatts of electrolyzer that will make clean hydrogen and ammonia for export to Europe. European countries and European industry are providing the long-term optics. In addition, the port of Luderitz is getting an upgrade, and there is going to be jobs and wealth creation in Namibia. I love this project. What's not to like? Namibia gets wealth and jobs. European gets clean, secure energy supplies. Still something soft. That's it. This project is 10 times bigger than Namibia whole grid. And this project will not sustainably build out of the infrastructure of energy access. No refrigerators, no new cars as a nation. Now again, this is a great project, but how can we do even better? Not just here, but everywhere. How do we harness abundant, sustainable, cheap energy for all? Well, there is three ingredients that will best. And if you plan to harvest abundance, you act differently in each. First, out of the gate, infrastructure. We need transmission We need transmission lines, roads, ports, railroads, filling station. We are not moving bits, we are moving molecules and electrons. We need things like infrastructure to get electricity to the people of Namibia and get clean fuels out of ports like Mombasa or Cartagena. These projects takes time, money, and people. We need to develop the human capital as part of these investment projects for decades. Because remember, children, for the rest of our lives, every week is infrastructure week. Second, out of the gate, innovation. We need much more energy in many places, much cheaper. That's an innovation agenda. Now, you all are familiar with the profound and rapid decreases in cost associated with solar photovoltaics. That was a combination of sustained investment in innovation plus market aligning policies plus mass manufacturing for solar. That was the United States, Germany, China, and the others acting together. Well, if that's the recipe, we can do that again. We are already doing it with electricity vehicle and clean hydrogen production. We can certainly do do it, but turning electricity into fuels and pulling carbon dioxide out of the sky. In fact, the carbon dioxide and clean hydrogen will be the next generation of sustainable maritime and aviation fuels. We can go way further with solar, with perovskites, with multi-excitation technologies like supermolecules. You can double or even triple the output. We just had fashion in California. Now, the harness, the abundance, and objective should be cost reduction, maybe 50 or even 80% cost reduction. Those objectives should be part of the goals of the institution that run innovation. For example, the U.S. Department of Energy Earth South programs. Third, investment. Specifically, we need to move away from single project finance to more systematic investment mechanism. One that reimagines risks across multiple projects, multiple investment cycles, and multiple years. Some of the goals of the audacious and overdue Bridgetown initiative. And in addition, the full value chain should be part of investment thesis. Revenues come from many sources, including the infrastructure itself, the equipment sales, the new product, and the improvement for health and welfare. Global positive investment, global positive growth that yields solid returns. Now, in the case of Chile, Japan is a key partner, and Japanese firms will make money on turbines, electrolyzer, ships, infrastructure, and debt. Now on green hydrogen project, it's not enough money to do that. You need, to build shipyards and supply chains. You need more than one project. So the Japanese government, in fact, backed dozens of projects. And these are anchored by bilateral agreement between Chile and Japan that include long-term offtakes. Multiple project and long-term offtakes change the value proposition for both countries. You're not feeding a set of shareholders, you're feeding two nations. And Chile has maintained its commitment to this now through three successive governments. Okay, so let's go back to Namibia. Here is the grid today. Instead of conventional project finance for one project, what would $100 billion set of project look like? Well, for starters, you have to add solar and wind. Maybe supersize some projects. Maybe add some hydropower. Instead of temporary construction jobs in Lüderitz, you'd have permanent construction industry there, and you'd be building electrolyzers all over Namibia that would anchor supply chains across sub-Saharan Africa. And you'd train a generation of workers that would be big enough for desalination, bringing fresh water to the desert and the community and to the new industries, big enough for hospitals, universities, regional logistic hubs, big enough to encourage good governments, and best of all, low-cost clean fertilizer that could be used to make food in Namibia, sold there, and it is neighbors. In effect, Namibia could be a global anchor for food and food, and the investor will get a solid return. Now, that's a future I'm optimistic about, because let's be honest, whether I'm optimistic or not, the work looks the same. So let's reimagine that first question. It doesn't matter whether I'm optimistic or you're optimistic. It matters if we're optimistic. Collective action, willing together, is what makes the difficult possible and nourishes the soul through a mission and purpose. And we have a lot of to be optimistic about. Infrastructure, innovation, and investment are commitments to the future anchored in optimism. We also have tools and tech we need. We know what to do. We can act out no out of anger or fear, but out of generosity and common purpose, bringing aspiration and humility together, we are going to build a thriving, vibrant, exciting world full of generosity and full of potential that's going to be built. Okay, thank you so much, sir. That's all from me. Sorry if there is like ads or something in my bad. Okay, thank you so much for this one semester. It's been a great semester for us.